My mom called me a burden, ignored my emergency room text, saying we're busy with your sister, so I took one shocking action that shattered their perfect life. 35 female. My parents have basically been treating me like their personal piggy bank since I got my first real job out of college. It started with just this once, when their AC broke down in the middle of July. I still remember my dad calling me practically hyperventilating about how my mom was struggling in the heat. She has breathing issues. My dumbass transferred them $1,800 for a new unit right away. They pinky promised they'd pay me back when dad got his bonus. Yeah, that never happened. But I let it slide cause like they're my parents, right? Fast forward 7 years and I'm literally paying for everything. Their mortgage $1,500 a month. Both car payments about $650. All their insurance premiums, another $800, and these random emergencies that somehow always seem to happen right when they're planning a trip to visit my aunt in Florida. Last year, I checked my bank statements and almost had a heart attack. I'd given them over $45,000. That's like a down payment on a house or something. Meanwhile, my sister Sarah is their precious little angel who walks on water. She's 32 and still lives in their basement because finding an apartment is so hard these days and entry-level jobs don't pay enough. But somehow she's got money for Lululemon leggings and weekend trips to Nashville with her friends. She got her cushy marketing job because dad knows the owner. And mom still does her laundry and cooks her special meals because Sarah's so stressed at work. I can't make this up. Mom's always like, but Sarah is so creative and sensitive. She's just finding her way. Yeah. And I'm just the boring one with a finance job who they call when the credit card bill comes. I literally work 60-hour weeks while Sarah posts TikToks from their pool. The most frustrating part, I keep paying. I keep hoping maybe this time they'll appreciate it. Maybe this time they'll actually remember my birthday without Facebook reminding them. Maybe this time they'll actually ask about my kid without me bringing him up first. Honestly, writing this out makes me realize how pathetic I've been. Like, what am I trying to prove? That if I just give them enough money, they'll suddenly love me as much as they love Sarah. I've talked to my therapist about this so many times. She keeps telling me I'm stuck in this pattern of trying to earn their love, but I just can't seem to break the cycle. Every time I think about cutting them off financially, I get this awful guilty feeling in my stomach. What if they lose the house? What if they can't afford dad's heart medication? What if Sarah has nowhere to live? But then I remember how they treated me when I really needed them. And I think maybe it's time they figured their own out for once. Anyway, 2 years ago, my life basically imploded. My husband Jake, who I thought was my actual soulmate, decided that banging his 23-year-old intern was more important than our marriage and son. We'd been together since sophomore year of college. That's 13 freaking years, people. I found out in the most cliché way possible. He forgot his iPad at home and a message popped up that said, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you later." I'm not proud of it, but I went full detective mode and found hundreds of texts between them going back months. When I confronted him, he didn't even try to deny it. Just said, "I wasn't planning to tell you like this, but yeah, I've met someone else." Someone else? She was literally an intern at his company. He moved out that night, filed for divorce 2 weeks later, and was living with her within a month. They're married now, BTW. She posts these sickening love of my life captions on Instagram all the time. I was absolutely wrecked. Like, couldn't get out of bed, forgot to eat, crying in the shower, wrecked. The only thing keeping me functioning was our son Talon, who was 8 at the time and completely confused about why daddy suddenly moved out. So, I called my parents thinking now they'd finally step up. Their daughter's marriage just exploded. Their grandson is confused and hurting. Surely, this is when family comes through, right? My mom's response, "Well, sweetie, men have needs. Were you maybe too focused on your career? Did you let yourself go a little after Talon was born?" I was so stunned I couldn't even respond. My dad's contribution to the conversation was asking if I'd still be sending money for their car payment that month. Not a single question about how Talon was handling it or if I needed any help. I hung up and just sat on my kitchen floor crying for like an hour, but then something completely unexpected happened. Jake's parents called me. Now, I was dreading talking to them because I figured they'd take their son's side and I'd lose them, too. But Linda, Jake's mom, said, "We don't care what's happening between you and Jake. You're still our daughter and Talon is still our grandson." And they showed up. Like really showed up. They picked up Talon from school when I had to work late. They kept him overnight when I had important meetings early the next day. Tom, Jake's dad, never missed a single baseball game. Even when Jake himself was too busy to attend. Linda taught Talon how to bake and helped him with his homework. One time, I I had a total breakdown because the dishwasher flooded my kitchen at 10 p.m. and Jake wouldn't answer his phone to help. I called Tom in desperation and he drove 45 minutes to my house, fixed the dishwasher, helped me clean up the water, and then refused to take any money for it. Meanwhile, my own parents couldn't even remember Talon's birthday. They sent a card 2 weeks late with a $15 Walmart gift card. But they sure remembered to call when their roof started leaking and they needed $7,000 for repairs. The contrast was so stark. Linda and Tom treated me like family even when they had no obligation to. My actual blood relatives treated me like an inconvenience unless they needed cash. For 2 years after the divorce, I barely heard from my parents except when a bill was due. They'd occasionally ask about the boy, but couldn't be bothered to come to his school play or soccer games. Saren's birthday was a mandatory family gathering with catered food and custom decorations that I paid for. But Talon's birthday didn't even warrant a phone call. I kept telling myself that's just how they are, that they show love differently, that I shouldn't expect too much. But deep down, I knew the truth. They just didn't care that much about me or Talon. We weren't priorities. We were ATMs with pulses. However, about 6 months ago, something super weird started happening. My parents suddenly turned into these involved grandparents. It was like body snatchers took over or something. It started with my mom calling on a random Tuesday. I was in the middle of a work meeting when her name popped up on my phone. I almost ignored it because she never calls unless they need money. But I figured it might be an emergency, so I stepped out to answer. "How's Talon doing in school?" she asked, completely casual. Like, she asks this all the time. I almost dropped my phone because she'd literally never done that before. She didn't even know what grade he was in or who his teacher was. I actually stammered like an idiot because I was so caught off guard. He's fine. Got an A on his science project last week," I said, waiting for the inevitable pivot to whatever bill they needed me to pay. But it never came. She just chatted about Talon for a few minutes, asked if he was still into dinosaurs. He was into dinosaurs when he was 6. He's all about space now. And then said, "Your father and I were thinking you two should come over for Sunday dinner this weekend." Sunday dinner? We hadn't been invited for a meal since before the divorce. Even at Christmas, we'd always been the ones to invite ourselves over, and they'd act like we were imposing. It got weirder from there. When we showed up that Sunday, the house was clean. There were actual place settings on the table. My mom had made Talon's favorite dessert or what was his favorite 3 years ago. The kid doesn't even like chocolate cake anymore, but whatever. My dad actually put his phone down and talked to Talon about school. He asked about baseball. Talon plays soccer, but A for effort, I guess. And even dug out some old comic books from the attic that used to be mine. Then the really weird part, as we were leaving, they offered to babysit. Let me repeat, my parents offered to babysit. These are the same people who once told me they didn't sign up for childcare duties when I asked if they could watch Talon for 2 hours while I went to a doctor's appointment. "We could take him for a whole weekend if you want," my mom said, smiling way too brightly. "Give you some me time. You work so hard." I actually checked to see if she was running a fever. My mom had never acknowledged that I work hard ever. I didn't know how to feel about that. But this bizarre behavior continued for weeks. Sunday dinners became a regular thing. They called to check on Talon. They bought him presents for no reason. They even showed up at one of his soccer games. My dad complained about the folding chairs hurting his back the entire time. But still, they showed up. I was honestly shocked, but also hopeful, like maybe they'd had some kind of epiphany. Maybe one of them had a health scare they weren't telling me about that made them realize life is short. Maybe they finally understood what being grandparents is supposed to be like after seeing their friends with their grandkids. I actually cried in my car after that first soccer game they attended. Talon had scored a goal and my dad had cheered. Actually cheered. I couldn't remember the last time he'd shown enthusiasm for anything I or Talon had done. It felt like I was finally getting the family I'd always wanted. The supportive parents, the involved grandparents for Talon, the sense of belonging I'd craved my entire life. I know. I'm a complete sucker, but I've wanted their approval since I was a little kid. Bringing home straight A report cards that they'd sign without comment while praising Saren for her C++ in art class. I've spent my whole adult life trying to be good enough, and it seemed like maybe I finally was. I was so grateful that I actually increased their monthly allowance. Typing that makes me cringe now. On top of the regular bills I was already paying, I started sending an extra $1,500 a month. I was literally paying for their entire kitchen renovation because they were helping out so much with Talon. Now, the granite countertops alone were like $4,000, but I thought it was worth it if they were finally going to be real family to us. My coworker, Jen, thought I was nuts. She kept saying, People don't change that fast without a reason. But I shut her down. I didn't want to hear it. I was too busy basking in my parents' approval to question their motives. But Talon was suspicious from day one. Kids have these crazy accurate detectors, you know. We were driving home after the third Sunday dinner, and he was quieter than usual in the back seat. "Mom, why do Nana and Pop suddenly want me to come over all the time? They never cared before," he asked, staring out the window. "They're just trying to make up for lost time, buddy," I told him, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. Sometimes people realize what's important when they get older. But he just gave me this look that was way too wise for a 10-year-old. "They still don't know what grade I'm in, Mom. Pop called me Marcus yesterday and Nana keeps asking about dinosaurs even though I told her 3 times I'm into astronomy now." He was right, of course. They were going through the motions, but the details were off. Like actors who hadn't fully learned their lines. "And they kept asking about your work," he continued. "If you got a raise or a bonus, they never used to care about your job except when they needed money. Out of the mouths of babes, right?" But I brushed it off because I wanted to believe they'd changed. I was so desperate for their approval that I ignored all the red flags. Classic me. Then I found out the truth, and it was exactly as bad as you're all probably thinking. I stopped by their house unannounced one day to drop off some groceries I'd bought them. Yes, I was paying for their food, too, on top of everything else. Mom was on the phone in the kitchen and didn't hear me come in through the side door. "Yes, we've got her sending extra now," she was saying to someone, her voice all smug and satisfied. "The kitchen will be finished by Christmas. No, we just have to pretend to care about the kid for a few hours a week. Small price to pay for a new Sub-Zero fridge." I just stood there in the hallway feeling like someone had slapped me across the face. It was all fake. The sudden interest in Talon, the family dinners, the offers to babysit, all of it just to squeeze more money out of me. I backed out quietly and sat in my car for like 20 minutes just staring at nothing. I couldn't even cry. I was just empty, then angry, then embarrassed for being so gullible. Later, I found out she was talking to Saren. My sister knew about the whole scam and thought it was funny. They were playing me like a fiddle and laughing about it behind my back. I drove home that day and looked at my bank statements. Over the past 6 months since they'd started their little loving grandparents act, I'd given them an extra $15,000 on top of their regular expenses. For what? For pretending to give a shit about us. I almost called them out right then. I had this whole speech prepared in my head about how they'd been using me for years and it was finally going to stop. But then I decided to wait. I wanted to see how far they'd take this charade. I didn't have to wait long for them to show their true colors. But then life decided to test exactly how crappy my family could be. Let me put you in the context first. About a month ago, I started getting these killer headaches. Like worst pain I've ever felt in my life. I'm talking wake up in the middle of the night, can't function, please just let me die headaches. I've always gotten migraines, so at first I chalked it up to stress. Gee, wonder where that came from. And was just popping Advil like candy. My coworker, Jen, noticed something was off when I kept squinting at my computer screen and wearing sunglasses indoors. "You need to see a doctor," she kept saying, but I was all, "I don't have time." And it's just stress because that's what working moms do. We ignore our own health until we literally can't function. Then one morning, just after I realized the reason behind my parents' sudden affection, I woke up and everything was different. The pain was even worse. And when I looked in the mirror, I noticed my left eye wasn't tracking with my right one. I tried to focus on my reflection, but the left side of my vision was just dark. Everything was blurry and strange, and my head felt like it was literally going to explode. Don't ask me why, but I tried calling my ex Jake first. Maybe out of habit. Maybe because I didn't have anyone by my side. But of course, it went straight to voicemail. He was on his honeymoon with a former intern, now wife in Bali. Yes, really. They'd been posting these nauseating couples photos on Instagram from their overwater bungalow all week. Then I called Linda and Tom, but remembered they were on that cruise they'd been planning since Tom's retirement, the first vacation they'd taken in years. They'd even invited Talon to go with them, but he had school and I didn't want him to miss it. I started panicking because Talon was still asleep in his room, and I knew something was seriously wrong with me. I could barely stand up without feeling like I was going to throw up or pass out. I called my neighbor, this amazing 70-year-old woman who has basically adopted us since we moved in. She came right over in her pajamas and slippers to stay with Talon, and I drove myself to the ER. Stupid move. Don't do this. Call an ambulance if you're ever in this situation. The drive to the hospital is mostly a blur. I remember barely seeing the road and having to pull over once to throw up on the side of the road. I kept thinking about Talon waking up and me not being there. And it gave me just enough focus to keep driving. When I got to the ER, I stumbled in and told the triage nurse my symptoms. The second I mentioned sudden vision loss and the worst headache of my life, everything changed. They rushed me back immediately. No waiting room time at all. The next few hours were a whirlwind of CT scans, MRIs, and doctors with serious faces. The neurologist who came to see me didn't sugarcoat it. "You have what's called a baryaneurysm in your brain, and it's starting to leak," he said, showing me the scan. "We need to do emergency surgery to clip it before it fully ruptures. If that happens," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I asked him what my chances were, and he hesitated. "If we get you into surgery within the next hour, your prognosis is good. If we wait..." Another unfinished sentence. That's when it really hit me. I could actually die today. Right now, I could leave Talon without a mother. I started sobbing, which only made my head hurt worse. All I could think about was Talon. What would happen to him if I died? Would Jake step up? Would he end up living with his 23-year-old stepmom who posts duck-face selfies all day? Would he remember me in a few years? Does he know where I keep all the important documents? Did I ever tell him that thing about how his kindergarten art project is in that special box in my closet? My mind was racing with all the things I hadn't said, hadn't done, hadn't prepared for. I was literally facing death, and my biggest fear was my son ending up without me. The hospital needed to prep me for surgery immediately, but Talon was still at my neighbor's apartment. He'd be going to school soon, but someone needed to pick him up afterward. My neighbor couldn't drive anymore due to her eyesight, so that wasn't an option. In my painkiller-addled state, I thought maybe my parents would finally step up. Surely a literal life or death emergency would bring out some basic human decency. So, I called my mom. I was crying, terrified, about to go into brain surgery. And I begged her to please just pick up Talon from school and watch him for the night. "Oh, sweetie, we can't today," she said, sounding genuinely annoyed that I'd asked. "Saren just got a promotion at the marketing firm, and we're taking her out to celebrate at that new steakhouse downtown. Can't his father get him?" I explained Jake was out of the country. I was desperate, literally being prepped for surgery that I might not survive. "Well, what about those in-laws you're always talking about? They seem to have plenty of time for him." My heart sank. Even now, even with my life at stake, they couldn't be bothered. "They're on a cruise, Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "Please, it's just one afternoon. He can even come to Saren's dinner. He just needs someone to pick him up from school. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this surgery." There was some muffled talking and then I heard my sister's voice. "Mom, put it on speaker. Hey, this dinner is really important to me. Can't you figure something out? Your kid is always causing drama at the worst times." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was about to have brain surgery and they were worried about dinner reservations for a promotion at a job my dad got her through his connections. "He's not causing drama," I whispered, barely able to talk through the pain. "I might die. I just need someone to pick him up from school. He's 10 years old." Saren scoffed, literally scoffed, and said, "God, your son is such a worthless burden. Always needing something, always draining everyone's energy and resources, just like his mom." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Those words, worthless burden, about a 10-year-old boy whose mom was literally in the hospital facing death. My own sister called my child, her nephew, a worthless burden while I was being prepped for emergency brain surgery. And my mom, did she defend her grandson? Did she scold Saren for being so cruel? She just sighed and said, "We'll see if we can move the reservation, but Saren's right." This is very inconvenient timing. Inconvenient timing for my brain aneurysm because it interfered with their dinner plans. I hung up the phone and just sobbed. The nurse who was prepping me for surgery looked alarmed at my monitors and asked what was wrong. I told her my parents refused to pick up my son from school and I didn't know what to do. Luckily, the hospital social worker overheard and immediately stepped in. She was this amazing woman who basically took over everything. She contacted Talon's school, explained the situation and arranged for him to go home with his best friend, Jaden, until they could reach someone. She even called my neighbor, who agreed to go with Jaden's mom to pick up some of Talon's things from our apartment. A total stranger showed more concern for my son than his own grandparents and aunt. As they were wheeling me toward the operating room, I was filled with this strange mix of terror and clarity. The doctor had told me there was a chance I might not wake up or might wake up with deficits. This could be it. The last conscious thoughts of my life. And in that moment, I made a decision. If I survived, I was done with my family. Completely done. No more money, no more chances, no more hoping they'd change. They had shown me exactly who they were at the moment I needed them most. And I was finally going to believe them. The surgery was successful. Obviously, Since I'm typing this, LOL, but recovery has been rough. I spent a week in the hospital and want to know who showed up. Linda and Tom cut their cruise short and flew back as soon as the hospital contacted them. They took shifts staying with me in the hospital and took care of Talon at home. Tom helped Talon with his homework via FaceTime from the hospital so I could rest. Linda bought me real pajamas so I wouldn't have to wear the hospital gown the whole time. And she washed my hair in the sink when I was too weak to shower. My boss not only brought food, but rearranged my entire project schedule and told me to take as much time as I needed. My neighbors set up a meal train that's still going strong. Jen from work took Talon to his soccer game so he wouldn't miss it. My neighbor made me homemade soup every day for 2 weeks after I got home. My parents? They sent a text 3 days after my surgery asking if I'd be making the mortgage payment on time because the bank had called them. That's when I decided to nuke their finances from orbit. All while I was recovering from literal brain surgery with a 10-inch scar on my head and a whole new perspective on life. Nothing makes you reevaluate your priorities like almost dying. I kept thinking about what the neurosurgeon told me after the operation. You're incredibly lucky. If you had waited even a few more hours to come in, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. I got a second chance at life and I wasn't about to waste it letting toxic people drain me anymore. While I was still in the hospital bed, I made some calls. First, I called the bank that holds my parents' mortgage. Turns out when you're the one making payments for 5 years, they're pretty willing to talk to you. I explained that I would no longer be responsible for the account and stop the automatic monthly transfers of $1,500. Next, I called both auto loan companies for their cars. Same deal. I informed them I was no longer making payments on loans that weren't in my name. That was another $650 per month saved. Credit cards, all 5 of them that I'd been paying minimums on for years. Cancelled my authorized user status and informed them I wouldn't be making any more payments. Home insurance, health insurance premiums, cell phone bill, internet service, streaming subscriptions, all terminated. I even called their country club and cancelled the membership I'd been paying for. $450 a month for them to play golf and complain about their neighbors. The deeper I dug into my finances, the more angry I got. I found recurring payments for Saren's gym membership, Amazon Prime, and even her freaking Botox appointments that had somehow ended up on my credit card. I cancelled everything. By the time I was done, I had reclaimed over $4,000 in monthly expenses that had been going to support my parents and sister. And they deserved exactly that after calling my son a worthless burden while I was facing potential death. When my mom finally called the next day, all she said was, "The bank called again about the mortgage payment. They said the payment was cancelled. What's going on? Did something happen?" I was so calm when I answered. Like weirdly calm. "Yeah, I've cancelled all financial support." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she basically exploded. "What? You can't do that. We have bills due. Your father's heart medication, the property taxes. How could you do this to us?" "Well, Saren just got promoted, right? I'm sure she can help out," I said, using her exact words from when I begged her to pick up Talon. She started crying then, like theatrical sobbing about how they'd be homeless and it was all my fault. How they're elderly and can't possibly support themselves now. How cruel I was being to my own parents who sacrificed everything for me. I just said, "Your daughter called my son, who was terrified his mother might die, a worthless burden while I was being prepped for emergency surgery, and you're calling me cruel." She tried to backpedal. "Saren didn't mean it like that. She was just stressed about her dinner." "You both showed me exactly what you think of us," I said. "Now you can show me how you'll manage without my money." Then I hung up and blocked both their numbers. I lay back in that hospital bed and felt this huge weight lift off me. Not just financial, but emotional. I wasn't responsible for them anymore. I didn't owe them anything. And here I am today. It's actually been 3 months since the great financial liberation. That's what my therapist calls it, lol. And a lot has happened. The fallout with my parents was exactly what you'd expect. Their car got repossessed last month. They're 3 months behind on their mortgage now. My dad had to get a part-time job at Lowe's. And my mom is apparently selling those hideous leggings in one of those pyramid schemes on Facebook. Saren had to move out of their basement and get an apartment with 2 roommates because they can't afford to support her anymore. She's been posting these sob story TikToks about having to start over at 32 and toxic family members who abandon you. I'd feel bad except I remember her calling my son worthless while I was about to have brain surgery. So, nope. Don't feel bad at all. They've tried to contact me through extended family, old friends, even my neighbors. They sent an actual letter in the mail begging me to be reasonable and think about family. The letter included an itemized list of bills they needed me to pay, including Saren's car insurance. The audacity is honestly impressive. I haven't responded to any of it. The only message I sent was through my lawyer, informing them that any further contact would be considered harassment. Meanwhile, my life has completely transformed. It turns out having an extra $4,000 a month makes a huge difference. I paid off my credit card debt, started a college fund for Talon, and even took a vacation last month. Just the two of us in San Diego. Linda and Tom are still absolutely incredible. Last week, Tom taught Talon how to change a tire because every man should know how to help someone stranded on the road. These people are what grandparents should be, but there was one huge development that made me believe in second chances. Dr. Cade, he is the neurosurgeon who saved my life. During one of my follow-up appointments, he asked if I'd like to grab coffee sometime. I was super awkward about it. You mean like to discuss my brain? And he just smiled and said, no, like a date, unless you're not interested, which is totally fine. Turns out we're both single parents with nightmare exes and complicated families. He's 38 with an 8-year-old daughter from his previous marriage. We've been seeing each other for about 6 weeks now and it's going really well. And what's making me feel warm and happy is that he and Talon get along amazing. They built this complicated model rocket together last weekend. And Talon hasn't stopped talking about it since. Dr. Cade, I still call him that as a joke, never talks down to Talon or treats him like a kid. He explains medical stuff and science concepts like Talon can understand them, which Talon absolutely loves. His daughter Zoe is sweet but shy. She lost her mom to cancer 2 years ago, so she's dealing with her own grief. Talon has been super patient with her, showing her his video games and including her in activities. Watching them together makes my heart do weird, flippy things. I don't know where this relationship is going, but it feels healthy. There's no drama, no manipulation. We're just two adults who enjoy each other's company and have compatible kids. I feel safe having someone by my side that could hold me when things get tough. So, that's where we are now. My bank account is healthier. My love life is promising. My kid is thriving. And the toxic people are out of our lives. Sometimes you have to nearly die to learn how to really live. And sometimes you have to stop paying other people's bills to finally invest in yourself. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. Your comments helped me feel less crazy and more confident in my decisions during this whole mess.